Hello everybody, welcome to Knife 911. And getting in right into it, welcome to the Shirogorov 111. 911 on this guy this is a big flagship production Shirogorov model in top trim with a fuller in M390 and blue carbon fiber. Something of a pocket sword for most people with its size, to say nothing of its price tag. $1,100 brand new from Recon 1, so it's space-distortingly expensive. It's a air quotes, traditional Sienkiewicz Shirogorov blade design. We'll get into that a little later, but first, a few stats. Overall length is 9.75 inches, or 247.6 millimeters. Closed length is 5.5 inches, or 139 millimeters. Blade length is 4.37 inches, or 111 millimeters. Its handle height, this way, is 1 1/8 inch, 28.6 millimeters, and its width, this way, is 0.57 inches or 14.5 millimeters. It weighs in at 5.36 ounces or 152 grams. It's got a, once again, traditional, in quotes, Sienkiewicz blade profile. A full flat grind. It's got Bowler Uta Holmes M390 blade steel. And it's $1,100 brand new, like I said. Now, you can get these on the used market for between $800 to $950. You find the right deal in good condition. Anyway, let's get right into it. The bear in the room here is cost. Is it really $400 better than a Koenig Arius? Well, no, but it's a lot more knife than the Arius, and it's all in that extra size for me. It's different from the Arius. It feels different. It has a cleaner blade design. It has a much stabbier tip. In a way, its size is what makes it worth buying, at least for me. This is one of two knives I have which really fit me well. I mean, look at this. This is a well-fitting knife for me. It just beautifully fits into my hand. The other knife I have that fits is the Praetorian. It's the Medford Praetorian T. Even the F3R, which is the next largest knife in Shirogorov's lineup, wasn't quite large enough for a full grip in my hand, and that's what most people would consider a large folding knife. Next thing which jumps into the frame is the high grind and profile of this knife. It's 150 thousandths of blade stock, 3.8 millimeters thick, and that blade stock continues until about there, about 2/3 of the way down the blade. So you've got this full thickness here. And the way that the Sienkiewicz Shirogorov grind works is that for that length where you have full thickness, this is flat. This edge is flat right here. It starts the upsweep at the same time as you start the distal taper. So it's a very clean, very graceful shape. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate it for its nice even taper. I appreciate it for its very stabby tip, because that comes in very handy when you need to core an apple piece by piece. Now 100. And that's the thing about these things is that, there's enough belly here where I don't feel at the least bit uncomfortable about firing the steak knife at whatever restaurant I'm at, because they're not sharp enough and using one of mine. And this is a good example. It's got just enough belly to get that done. So there's a lot of things this knife can do for you. And 150 thousandths is a thick piece of steel as EDC blades go, but the length of this blade makes the proportions seem right. Notice how when you look at it from this way down, it doesn't appear like it's a hugely thick piece of steel. And, it's still quite slicey despite that. Another thing which needs some of our recognition is the stonewash finish on this blade. It's so even and so fine that it looks more like a sandblast than a stonewash. And there are some very skilled makers on Instagram who make some incredibly fine pieces, which you can say the same of. This production knife has a similar finish so fine it's hard to tell if it's stonewash, blast, or satin. And if you look very close, you can tell that they have matched the finish of the top finish right here exactly to the blade finish. I mean, it's not a almost match, it's an exact match when you get it right up close in person. And, that kind of fanatical attention to detail is really the underlying pathos for every Shirogorov which I've handled. And I'm really looking for things to bitch about with this knife. Despite my best efforts, there are really only 3 things which I can find to bitch about. The first is this pocket clip. Oh, it's beautifully crafted and beautifully executed. It's just way too tight. There's way too much clip tension here, really, for most people. And I include myself in that. Second is the claim that this is blue carbon fiber. I mean, yeah, if you put it under the ridiculously bright lights that I'm shooting under, and you hold it right up to the camera at kind of an angle, you might be able to see some blue threads in there. But for most, it's straight carbon fiber. And then the only other thing is that there's really no sharpening choil. You see this three-dimensional plunge line right here, right? And look at where it goes up into the choil. So it's sort of a false choil that's there. When you're sharpening this thing, you're going to be very careful not to scratch up this surface right here. And so that's going to take some doing for me, and I plan to keep this knife for a long time, so a sharpening choil would have been a big help. Beyond those three things, wherever you look, you simply can't find anything to bitch about. Everything's been agonized over to the nth degree. You know, it's been inspected over and over and over, and once again for good measure. And all the design decisions here are good. I especially like the backspacer into the lanyard hole. And, you know, you got this recessed portion up front. You know, you got a flush / heirloom fit right here because there's just a little bit of space between the spacer and the... And then you got these machine lines in it, and they resisted the urge to jimp it, which is great. But it's got enough texture to get purchase on, and they did need to jimp it a little bit right back here, but hey, I'm not complaining. You know, I have to applaud their decision to integrate the lanyard hole into the backspacer and simply then just trimming the scales back a little bit in order to make it accessible. That was a great decision. I always like it when designers do very clean things like that. You know, and likewise, I have to applaud the decision to make it a liner locking knife, not a frame locking knife. And speaking of the liner lock, take a look at the lines that are machined into the bar right there. Really, it's quite something. But it's great because once you're not going to slip off this very easily. And when you have this much mass rotating on bearings, you want to be pretty sure of yourself. And lastly, if you look how all those design decisions are executed, you know, it's just incredible here that everywhere you look, and this Fuller is a great example, you see something which is incredibly difficult to do in a production setting. I mean, this doesn't look to be hand cut in. It doesn't really look to be machine done. You really can't tell by looking at it quite how they did it. It's a complex piece of work, but they did it perfectly. And that's true in a lot of different places on this knife. And so that really gets me going. I appreciate that very much. And another impressive thing here is the weight. It's only 5.3 ounces. By comparison, the 810 Contigo is 5.9 ounces, and it's not nearly as big. And that's because everything but the blade, the pivot, and the lock bar face is either carbon fiber or titanium, and it really does save a lot of weight. And 90% of the weight of this thing is probably resident in the blade right here. 150 thousandths is a lot of M390 to have hanging out there. That said, I like here, which is let's go straight to dispatch on this. The flagship models like this, the Shirogorov 111, are expected to be just the near side of perfect. And for $1,100, it had better be. I'm glad mine only cost me the equivalent of $800 because it simply isn't worth its brand new price tag. If you can't buy one used for around that $800 mark, go for one of the G10 models, which pop up on the Usual Suspects network or Blade forums, brand new for around $700. That's where product meets value product value meets the price tag, in my opinion. And, isn't it great? Well, yeah, it's great, but it's not $400 greater than that same G10 model or the red carbon fiber Arius for the same price. In my opinion, custom Division 111s and buying one of these things brand new is just for collectors who like spending a lot of money. And, well, I mean, yeah, I collect knives, but I don't like spending a lot of money, and I use everything that I buy. I mean, this thing was in my pocket tonight. So that's the dispatch on this, guys. Pick one up used. I mean, it's a great value used. They're not going to lose value unless you really damage it, but that same could be said of any knife. All right, everybody. That's tonight's Knife 911. Out.